What worries me the most is probably the prediction about Cuba, in the sense that he predicts that actually nothing is going to happen until Castro dies. I'm hopeful that this is not going to be true, but we'll see. I think that sometimes he models everything in a model that is kind of static, not as a repeated game. So, for example, when he says that you don't care about kind of culture or history, or you don't care about, it's kind of his models are kind of simplistic, because in reality, sometimes you behave in a way right now that is not so rational, and actually is not so self-interested, because you want to play a repeated game. And I think his predictions were a little bit simplistic in that way, and everything was kind of static. So in that way, I'm not so sure about his predictions. So what worries me about the prediction of Cuba is that he basically predicts that nothing is really going to happen. And my sense of Cuba, actually I lived 1 year in Cuba, is that a lot of things are going to happen very soon. Actually, my bet is that actually Castro is going to play a bigger role, and he's trying to be a hero. But his prediction is that he's going to be just the same guy, and he's going to try to stay in power forever and ever. And my bet is that this is not going to happen. The prediction about Venezuela was that actually Chavez was going to just maybe put in the eggs in the wrong basket because he was betting on Iran. But I don't think that Chavez is only betting on Iran. He's doing much more than that. So in that sense, I don't think that his prediction about that Chavez is going to be completely wrong with Iran is really that relevant, because actually Chavez is playing kind of with many cards, not only with this card. On the other hand, I think that Chavez actually, I hope that Chavez is going to be, because of Lula and because of probably even Bachelet or other guys from the left, in Latin America is going to be neutralized. If that happened, probably that's going to be actually much more important in the game than just what's going to happen with Iran. So in that sense, I don't think that his prediction on Iran was that relevant for the context of Latin America.
The most troubling prediction, actually I found reason for optimism tonight. I liked what he said about Iran. I liked what he said about Hugo Chavez. I think if there's any threat to the region, it's Hugo Chavez. And now that I'm not with CNN anymore, I can say that because I'm just un Latinoamericano más. And I thought what he said about Iran made sense in the sense that there's other forces at play there, and that those would affect Hugo Chavez. I believe that he did bet on the wrong horse in that case, and that could only mean good news for the entire continent. Well, I think in terms of Cuba, I think he was right. I mean, U.S. policy towards Cuba has been flawed for decades now, and I think most everybody agrees with that. And I don't see any reason for that to change because there's somebody new in the White House. However, I do agree with him when he says that real change will come to Cuba once Raul Castro is gone, because there's no clear successor to him. And I think that I would hope that by that time, the Castro revolutions or the Castro brothers' idea of a true revolution would have lost steam.
I think what struck me the most about the predictions for the hemisphere is the calculation that Chavez made the wrong bet. Because that's one of the fascinating economic questions, political questions, cultural questions, more of the economics and the pressures of free speech in Venezuela, and what Chavez has become as an example in the region. So if that's the right prediction, if Hugo Chavez is with us for a shorter period of time than most people would say today, the significance, the potential impact of that on the hemisphere and then beyond, just because of the power of oil. And the power, the world looks for people to speak a message. And with Fidel Castro gone and Raul Castro not so vocal, Chavez has stepped up a role in the region. And so if that prediction's right and that's a bad bet, then the pace of transformation in the region could come much faster than I think most people would tell you today. Well, I agree with Bruce's point that with maybe a little bit of disagreement, he says, never mind history. I say, don't bet on history. Sometimes history is a factor, in politics anyway. But if you were to say, 3 years ago, was the United States ready to elect an African-American president, especially if that African-American would be a 47-year-old man who had only been in national office for a couple of years, had never run a business, never run a corner store, was born outside of the United States, a citizen, but lived his youth outside of the United States. Would that person be president of the United States? No. There's not a mathematical model or a historic model that would get you to that answer. And so data is helpful. history is a guide, but if you believe history is already poured in cement, the world before us is not. And so if you say, well, this happened yesterday or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, therefore this will happen tomorrow, especially in a world that is changing so much with technology, with communications, with our media business, with the political business, you'll be wrong. If you rely too much on history, you'll be wrong. I agree with that completely. I think that people have been trying to predict the Cuba end going back to Dwight Eisenhower. The Castros have run Cuba since the 1950s. So you can predict that end, and I think Bruce's calculation that the key moment is when Raul passes from the scene, when there's not a Castro in charge, then what happens? So the thing that is more predictable is our end, is the United States end of the equation, and that is changing quite dramatically. Cuba politics and Cuba policy have been intertwined and stuck together in large part because of the influence of the Cuban American population right here in Miami. But generationally, there's a shift underway there, where many of the younger Cubans say, let's try something else. We've been at this, my father did this, my grandfather did this, and they're heroes, but let's try something new. Farmers in the United States want to change the policy because they want to sell food. Other businesses in the United States, whether it's the hotel industry, the cruise industry, the tourism industry, sees an economic opportunity. At a time of recession here in the United States, you're looking for any market anywhere in the world. So from economic interests and then what I'll call generational interests, in that the Cuban community is not 100% anymore. Is it 50%? Is it 60%? You know, that's an open question still, but there's no question that there's a generational shift in thinking, and therefore the American side of the politics will change. And potentially now, with Obama in the White House, change dramatically in the next 3 to 5 years. I think the Obama administration in terms of Cuba will continue a gradual liberalization. It's too risky, too controversial to say in one full sweep, embargo gone, remissions can go up, people can travel back and forth, but they are doing this incrementally. And at some point, incrementally becomes a big enough mass of change that then the whole policy shifts. And I do think they will continue that, and they'll take a small step, then another small step that's maybe a little bigger, and then a little bigger after that, as long as they continue to have enough support here in the Cuban-American community, and as long as they can point and say that at least nothing bad has happened. Maybe nothing good has happened. If the Castro reaction to more American openness is somehow to be more punitive, more repressive, then there'll be a debate about, is this working? If the Castro reaction is, I don't care what you do, and he doesn't change, but it doesn't get worse, then I think you'll be able to keep the moral argument that the administration wants, which is, what we've done hasn't worked, so let's try something different. And we think the more openness, the more transparency, the more the Cuban people can see our way of doing things, the more they will foment against their government. So I think you will see increased gradual steps, and each of those steps will get a little bigger if the president can keep the confidence that politically here at home change is supported.